invited to be in the same space with all of you and to share the intimacy of the connections and the story and the positive and the power of these narratives. So I wanted to share that level of appreciation to start with. As you know, in arts, we are leading with cultural humility, as well as critical consciousness and race and social justice. So let's share a moment of our statement regarding the Indigenous land. We acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land, the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land that we are on. And we take that moment of silence as we follow. You know, it's really amazing. I was sharing that in what, 30 days, help me here, Ashraf, in 31 days in August? Okay, I was out partying in real life on 18 of those days, and it was so amazing. So I look forward to being able to do that with you all as well. But we're here virtually today, really in a really important way of approaching this, and that's a direct response to artist and tonight's moderator, Alma, Garcia. This is your idea for written evaluation, to be an actual verbal artist-to-artist exchange of lessons. And so thank you so much for the level of emotional maturity and bravery, quite frankly, in saying, let's be there all together, not only transparent, but building that relationship as we talk. So as you all know, individual artists are the core of the arts and culture ecosystem. We have a thing, if I get this right, Ashraf, not art everywhere, rather artists everywhere is how you get art everywhere. You cannot forget that individual laborer, that individual emotional input, that individual willingness to bear the bone, the souls, the meanings, the cultural sharing that happens when artists come into a space. For the CityArtist grant, we in arts, nearly 200 applications. And this is from individual-based creatives and curators to research and develop and present new work in all of the practice or disciplines or genres. So it's really exciting. Our artists, as you all know, need this support. And so these share out sessions really provide that community of folk, of creatives with peer-to-peer collegial connections and learning that intentionality, and this is something I'm paraphrasing Irene Gomez here, the intentionality and the opportunity to hone and advance their practice and careers in a collegial, safe, and welcoming environment. And so we are especially proud here in the Office of Arts and Culture tonight that we share out, that the share out concept was initiated by Alma Garcia. And I'm gonna perhaps embarrass you for a moment, Alma Garcia, but it goes like this. In my mind and in the community's mind, initiated by Alma Garcia, a brilliant, brilliant co-leader, writer, musician, and former CityArtist awardee and panelist. Did I get all those pieces in there? And enhanced by renowned musician Kevin Clark. So like, this is the best place to be right now, hands down. So getting input and ideas from our individual artists and the artistic community and making them happen in real time is important to our staff, to the office, and is critical to the city and provides that social cohesion that we're all relearning, but we all value in our hearts. So doing it in real time is the hard part because we know we have the compassion and the passion for social cohesion and for building and making cultural art spaces. So in doing this program, we are definitely continuing to reimagine our collective work, your collective works, and doing it in tandem with you, with the artists, the cultural makers, the placemakers, the collectives, and the organizations here in the city is phenomenal. And this is how we go post-pandemic. We were pandemic, it was endemic, we want to be post-pandemic. And this is a big step in doing that. So I want to thank you for making all of this happen. And to keep arts really informed on how how we can continue improving what we do to assist, and how we appear in the space. It's just critical in order for us to be effective. So my best and heartfelt regards to you, and actually in my culture we say on you because it's personified, but I'm going to use display English and English relationships and say to you, on your culture, on the current activity, about your cultural humility, your future creative endeavor, and it's for the benefit of the public and your career. That's a lot. That's a heavy lift at the same time. And you do it with such generosity and grace that, again, I'm privileged to be participating in this with you. And I would like to especially take a moment, if I might, Astrid, to thank both you and Irene for your public sector leadership and non-interference with the artist and with the program, and really appreciate the way in which you all have created and shaped it, how it continues to improve the City Artist as a program, and how you have the cultural and generative generosity to listen to the artist in tandem with taking your responsibilities in the public sector. So with that, I say thank you so much for having me in the space. I hope I'm invited to stay and listen. And the best to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Ali Barnes. That was lovely. And you took some of my talking points, so mine will be a little bit shorter, which is awesome. No, this is good. We're going to focus on the artist today. That's what it's all about. And you yourself, Director Ali Barnes, are a renowned artist as well. So thank you for your work in the community, not just as an administrator, but as an artist and a thought leader in this work. But beyond that, I want to also thank all the artists and staff who are attending and volunteers as well. Kevin and Alma and otherwise. Irene is unable to be here, unfortunately, because she had a bit of an emergency to tend to. We're sending her good vibes, and we're sure that she'll be good. So send her those good vibes for sure. CityArtist, as you know, and as Director Ali Barnes just mentioned, is an annual grant program for Seattle-based artists. It is unique in that it is quite artist informed, so much so that through artists and through the feedback that we've gotten through the years, we open it to different disciplines in alternative years. Odd years to dance, music, and theater. That was this last opportunity that closed, and then literary, media, film, and visual arts, which is what Ellen and David here are practicing and are presenting to us today. This share out, as Will mentioned, was the genius idea of Alma Garcia to make sure that we aren't just putting these reports that are required for city grants and reporting in a box and never looking at them again. So thank you, Alma. She'll be expanding on how that came about and how this space will continue to iterate in the future. And we'll have more in the future. A little bit of housekeeping is you'll notice the session is recorded. So if you'd like to hide your image and mute, that's totally cool. We always love to see folks as much as you'd like to be seen, though. And the questions, your questions are super important. Please put them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can before closing. Kevin over here is going to be monitoring the chat and looking for those questions to insert. And then now I'm just going to pass it over to artist and moderator Alma Garcia, who will start the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Garcia. I've done this before, but not like this. This particular iteration of the share out was born of a very casual conversation that Irene Gomez took and ran with and turned it into a whole new way of doing things that I think is really exciting. It's true that so often we work as artists, especially perhaps literary artists in a silo, and you after having produced a very labor-intensive project, to have to create a very labor-intensive report at the end it can be kind of draining to the creative impulse to begin with, not to mention that it doesn't exactly create a connection to any other human other than in an administrative sense. So it's been really exciting to see what this share out has become. This is the second time we've done it. The first time was pre-pandemic and it was live. And it was amazing to see artists talking to each other about their works, and not just to the moderators and not just to the audience, although it was all of those things at once. And so now we're in a modified form for the time being, but this is a good thing too, because it's still a platform where people can connect who might not otherwise be able to show up to a live event. So there's a silver lining there, and hopefully moving forward there will be a way to who knows, maybe incorporate both. But it's still really, I'm really happy to be able to actually talk to the artists and to just get excited by their art. I was so excited by hearing everyone's projects, and I would have never known about them if this hadn't been an event, a thing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the artists for tonight. And then I'm going to let them each describe what their City Arts project is that they've just completed. And then I'm going to start asking them questions about how their project went. And the idea is that it's not going to be, super regimented. It'd be great if this can be a little bit like a free-flowing conversation when it's possible, and whoever is comfortable with starting or continuing or supporting the conversation, that's a great way to move forward. Though I'll help you if you need it. So who do we have here? We have David Quantic. He has been a filmmaker for over 15 years, and he's a highly skilled editor with 15 short films screened in festivals worldwide. He's a 6-year Seattle resident, and his work has appeared at the Queer Film Festival and by Cascade Public Media, which is the home of Crosscut Online News and KCTS, the Seattle PBS affiliate. Hi, David, welcome. We also have ELLEN SOLLOD. She is an established interdisciplinary artist who embeds research and experimentation with history as an arts policymaker, a public artist, and a book art and multimedia installation artist. So welcome, Ellen. Okay, so first I'd like to get each of you to describe in your own words what your project has been about, and then we'll talk about it. So David, why don't we go ahead and start with you? What can you tell us?
Well, thank you first for having me, and also for the amazing grant. I am an editor and filmmaker here in Seattle, and for the last 4 years I have been deep in a collection of oral histories of queer people as it relates to their sexual identity and their discovery of their own personal queer identity, especially as it relates to intimacy and sex. And I've been collecting these oral histories, as I said, for the last 4 years. And I've been filming everybody in 4K video, and then also converting each person's interview into a separate, unique podcast episode. So each episode of the podcast gives listeners an idea of that person's coming of age years and how they discovered themselves. And the grant that I received was not only to support the creation of the episodes in the podcast, but also to create a live event that was oriented towards the femme identified people and voices. I've had a struggle to get women and femme identified people to sit for my interviews, obviously because I'm not a part of that community myself, and I think it takes time to create trust with people to make sure that they can know that I'm somebody who will honor their stories and will protect them and share them in a respectful and meaningful way. So I partnered with a friend of mine, Rachel Brister, who is a longtime Seattle resident and former director of the Queer Film Festival here. She now does public relations, and she and I partnered together and created an event called Passion Fruit, which we funded through the City Arts grant. We held it at the Odd Fellows ballroom, the Century Ballroom up above Molly Moon's in Capitol Hill. And we geared it towards all femme voices. I did some talent scouting for the last few months, and found live performers whose work is geared towards femme identified queer people. And then within that event, I also made a pitch to the community and describing them my project, and also why I think they should contribute their stories. And it was a big lift to have an event in August inside. I learned a lot from trying to do that, especially with a community that I'm not personally a part of. But we got about 40, 50 people there.
That's great.
We were able to provide food and beverages for people, and it was a free event. People could come free of charge. And I really had a great time. And I think the people who came did as well. And, I made some really meaningful connections with members of the community, especially two professionals who I met through a friend who are in the therapy profession. They are people who are basically therapists who deal specifically with like issues of sexuality and sex. And one of them presented at the event. So that was really cool to have met them and to have included them in the event itself. And since the event, we've met up with other professionals at meet and greets and events like that. And I've started to become part of their community. So that alone made the whole effort worthwhile, just to have made those connections, because I really feel like that's going to help me moving forward with the project, to have some kind of connection with people who are trained to deal with subjects like sexual identity and also sexual trauma. One thing about my podcast that has evolved over the years is that not only is it a fun sharing experience for people who contribute their stories, but it's also a deeply meaningful process for them, especially as it relates to their coming of age years and some of the trauma that they went through in adolescence, and sharing their stories and owning them through the podcast has really been meaningful for them as well for me. And the project continues. I just actually released a new episode today. I'm doing it every other week now for the rest of the year. I did take August off after our passion fruit event because I was so exhausted, and I figured I needed some time to enjoy my summer too. But we've started to ramp up production again. And I do have a little cash left over from the grant, so I'm putting that towards production of more episodes. And also I'm going to use some of that leftover money for promoting the podcast on social media. So yeah, that's kind of what it was in a nutshell.
Wow. Okay. You are like, you're doing my job for me. This is this is great. You're 2 steps ahead of me, which is fantastic. We're learning. I'm so glad to learn about your project. I'm going to turn it over to Ellen for a moment, and we'll follow up with some more questions. But that sounds amazing.
So my project was called The Book of Small Regrets, and it was created in response to the COVID crisis, when even the smallest mistakes could seem catastrophic, when normally we might be able to do something that we regretted and we could reach out and hug someone or say we were sorry or do something. And in COVID, particularly in the beginning of quarantine, our ability to communicate with people other than Zoom or by phone or text, and it seemed to devolve to text a lot, was really limited. So the idea of the book was that, see if I can do this. The idea of the book was a way to bring people together, to allow people to express their own small regrets, and to recognize that we all have them and there's nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. But my approach to it was slightly different. And I'm a visual artist and I write. though I don't consider myself a writer. But I tapped my social network to contribute, to ask people to contribute their own small regrets. And the first thing I did was to send an email to about 300 people and ask them to complete this sentence, if only. Don't give me the backstory. Don't tell me what you wish should happen instead. Just tell me if only. And they could be as simple as, if only I hadn't gotten dressed in the dark. If only I would stop doom scrolling. If only I had set the alarm. If only I hadn't had 2 cups of coffee. So you get my drift. And so I asked people to send me their things. And I said, you know, you can send me as many as you like. Be assured that your identity will be safe. These will be used anonymously. I will not reveal whose small regrets they are. And you can also send me small regrets that maybe were made up, that actually didn't really happen. So I had quite a number of people who responded and sent me their small regrets. And I have the book here. I think I'll take my blurred background off so that it will be in focus. But I'll just flip it for a moment. So it combines text, watercolors, drawings, photographs. Okay, so the next section of the Book of Small Regrets came as I was taking walks every day and noticing the plethora of Amazon trucks and the amount of cardboard that was accumulating for recycle every 2 weeks. And if you can see, it says subprime, because what I realized is that people were making lots of impulse purchases that they later regretted. Was the wrong size, the wrong color, the wrong whatever, too expensive, too stupid, too missing a cable, and they were returning them. So in this case, I again wrote to about 300 people and said, tell me what impulse purchases you've made during COVID that you wish you hadn't. And in this case, I want the backstory. I want to know what you bought, why you bought it, why you later regretted it. Send me a picture, a drawing, a URL, or just your story. And in this case, I still promised your identity will be safe with me. I will not share your identity. So the book goes into things like, as soon as it arrived, you know, I had a tinge of regret, or a twinge of regret. And so here was the story of a person who had bought a cashmere coat to go with a fedora that he had, that he later regretted. Anyway, so I got a bunch of those stories. Then people started complaining about, see, what you were doing, David, was so serious and meaningful. And what I was doing was like so silly and ridiculous. But then people started complaining about the quarantine 15. And they started complaining about what they were eating that they had become habituated to, that they couldn't stop eating. And now they had formed this habit and they wish they would stop eating it, or they had never eaten in the first place. So the third section of the book is about comfort food. And so I asked people to tell me, what are the comfort foods you turned to during COVID that you later regretted? And, you know, it wasn't long before I asked myself, why did I eat that? And, you know, then I made photographs of food. There's no such thing as too much butter. Or I rationalized if it was homemade, the calories didn't, no, it must be good for you. If it was homemade, it must be good for you, homemade chocolate chip cookies. And if I ate it out of a bowl rather than a bag, the calories didn't count, and so on. So then the last section of the book, it was like, okay, so we've got all these regrets. Now what are we going to do with them? Maybe there's a way we could analyze them. Maybe in this society in which we're so obsessed with data and metrics, we could come up with some metrics and measurement, and then we could be free of our regrets. So the last section of the book is, can you measure regrets? And I developed a whole thing, which is called the theory of regrettability, that has to do with the amount of regret you have and amount of amends you need to make, whether your regret is to an inanimate object or to a pet or to a person. And they're all different levels of regret that go with the different inanimate object. I broke it and I feel kind of bad, but it's over. Not so much with your pet or your person. So it has to do with how much talk is required and how much amends is required for the theory of regrettability. And then there were the emotions of regret and things like the colors of regret. So the colors of regret, the paler the color, the less regret, the more intense the color, the bigger the regret. And, you know, the regrets range from anger, envy, sadness, remorse, anxiety, indecision, misgivings, and qualms. Then, of course, we had the sounds of regret. I won't make you listen. It's 136 pages, so you don't have to hear all of it, but here are a couple that are sort of fun. So the sounds of regret are grr, mumble, mumble, mumble. Oh shit, if only, arg, not again. Really? It wasn't me. Oops, I'm sorry. And then, of course, there are smells of regret. I'm not going to take every time. There are tastes of regret. But the thing that then was, okay, how do we resolve this? So I developed a formula for happiness and self-worth. And the key at the bottom of the page says, the formula, the key to happiness and self-worth is to keep the denominator down. So it's a division formula with the, you know, denominator. So if you keep the denominator low, you'll have less regret. And then the book ends with, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. This is a quote from William Bruce Cameron, which is often attributed to Albert Einstein. So this is another regret. Nobody knows who really wrote this quote, but it was written after Albert Einstein had died. So, so this is the Book of Small Regrets. It's a very fat little book that explodes with regrets out of the side. It's, as I said, 136 pages. It's what's called French fold, so that the pages that have the leading edge instead of cut is folded, which is why it expands the way it does. And then it's hand bound and has a metallic reflective stamp, letterpress stamp for the cover and the spine. So that's my Book of Small Regrets. Oh, and I should mention, actually, there were two public projects, two public events that I did that were really great and were surprising. So the first one that I did was with Nova High School. And I was a little trepidatious because I'm not a teaching artist. And while I've taught, I usually teach I usually teach college age students and not high school students. And so that's a little different. And I went into the classroom not knowing whether it would be like a big flop or, you know, just how to deal with it. Anyway, I developed a whole interactive class, which was using the prompts from the book and dividing it into small groups. And with the if only section, they did it like an exquisite corpse where they covered things up as they wrote it. And then they exchanged, as groups, they exchanged them and then read them all. They did an exercise with drawing their impulse purchases and their comfort food. And then we all talked about it. And what was really gratifying was how much the kids talked about how much it made them feel good to recognize that others had small regrets too, and that they didn't feel alone. So, and I have to say that this event occurred the Monday after the Uvalde murders. And so the kids were really, really upset for good reason. And so it was interesting to have this event that day with them, and for them to be so open and engaged. And then my other public event was at Hugo House, which was for me, because it's not a visual arts venue, I was actually really excited to do something in a non-visual arts venue. And the fellow at Hugo House who organizes the event suggested that I do it in conversation with someone, do it part presentation and part conversation. And he said, think about who you'd like to talk to. And so I went away thinking like, okay, who can I talk to? And it came to me that the person who I'd most like to talk to is Marcy Silman. And for those of you who've been in Seattle for a long time, you know of Marcy Silman as the arts and culture reporter from KUOW. And I couldn't think of anybody who I would rather be in conversation with than Marcy. And I've known her, you know, a little bit for a long time. I'm not close friends with her, but I know her well enough to be able to email her and ask her if she'd be willing to do it. And quite frankly, I didn't know whether she would, and she was totally enthusiastic about it. And she was fantastic. And it just made for a great event. Not connected to the grant, but just as a follow-up, I'm doing another event in November at Pratt. And so I'll be doing a kind of a master artist talk. And the talk at Hugo House really focused on the more of the content of the book. And I anticipate that the one at Pratt will be more about the physicality of the making of the book. How did you go from making all these watercolors and photographs and all of this into translating it into this kind of a product? And I also would echo what David said, which is without this grant, I could not have done this. I worked with Girly Press, who's a really wonderful press in the Central District. And they just did such beautiful work. And then I was able to work with Phil's Custom Bindery because it's an edition of 50. And, you know, I could have bound one, but I couldn't have bound 50. And so I worked with Scott, and I have to tell you that I was the last project of Phil's Custom Bindery, who had been in business for nearly 50 years. And when he finished my project, he closed the business. So I am really grateful that I had that opportunity, and without the grant, I couldn't have done it. So thank you all for that support.
Well, thank you. So I'm loving all the, you know, we're getting incredible detail from our artists tonight, which is great. This is exactly what we want to know about. And I think what's remarkable about, you know, even though we have two very different projects and different kinds of artists here, is that both of these projects seem to address the unspoken amorphous anxiety that people have had either over a lifetime or over the last 2 years, and that seek to connect, to bring it to the surface in order to connect to someone outside of that anxiety. And so I think that's really powerful to hear from both projects. So I'm gonna ask some questions now, and maybe, if we feel like we've covered this already, we can move on to the next thing. But I think either one of you should feel comfortable just starting, and if there's sort of a natural segue for the other artist to say, oh yeah, and I had that thing happen to me too, or in my experience was different, or let's do it like that. So I guess if we haven't covered it already, what can either of you say about what went well for your project? Like, what ways did the project go smoothly, and or did it diverge in a way that actually made it better than what you'd originally planned on?
I'll start. The project, one of the things that I kept saying during COVID was that I was so glad I was an artist, because for a lot of people, focus was difficult during that time. And so one of the things that was great about this project is it really focused me, and it was something every day that I had reason. And so that was actually, I don't know if that's a highlight of the project, but that's something that was great about it. And I will also say that in terms of the actual final form of the book, I started by making these watercolor paintings, which are not the size that they are in this book, and doing a lot of writing. And I struggled for a long time with what the final form was going to be. And I actually designed a whole, well, what I thought was the whole book, and it didn't feel right to me. And I ultimately threw all of that out. Well, I kept the watercolors because they're in the book, but the form of it, the structure, the size of it, a lot of things about it, the design of it, I threw completely out and started over. And all for the good. And I often feel that way about, you know, I did a lot of public work and I had a lot of stuff that got completely thrown out and started over. So almost for me, it's almost like I have to go through that process of iteration. And so that's not what you're counting on. You're hoping that you're just going to have this brilliant idea and this is going to take you through. But it ended up being a good thing. But yeah, I completely started over.
Sometimes the art we make is not like the art that happens is what comes out when we're making other plans. Indeed. Well, thank you. How about you, David? Did you have what were your experiences in terms of what went well in your project?
Well, certainly like the event part of the grant and the sort of the mission of it was really challenging to me because the project has been from its very beginning a one-on-one conversation with one person at a time, and creating the live event for me was a real challenge and one that I look back on fondly because it really did push me to go big and to really try to evolve the project into something that could be more communal and more public. And because I think that there's room in the project for both kinds of interactions. And so I was surprised by how much I enjoyed putting the event together. I am not a typical gay in that I like to entertain large groups. Like, I'm not somebody who throws dinner parties or has parties in general. So I think it really helped that Rachel was there too to help me along the way and to kind of lead me through the process of making a public event. So that part was, like I said, a challenge, but also very rewarding in the end. And I think something that I probably would like to do in the future. Yeah.
Great. That's really helpful to know that, you know, the particular factors that led to these elements of success. I think that's really useful when we can isolate those. Yeah. So that said, you know, with all the things that went really well for both of your projects, what can either of you tell me about what could have gone better? And just in terms of like, what were the most challenging aspects of making the project come together? And what are the ways in which it diverged from the plan in a way that maybe made things more challenging in the end?
I'll go ahead. Like I said before in my introduction, like having a live event in the summer inside is a real big lift. For anyone, I think even seasoned promoters of events, that's just not something that people do much. I wish I'd known that before setting the date. I think originally I had plans of doing it during Pride Month. I'm not sure if it would have been better or worse or any different. I think looking back now, when I do another live event, it'll definitely be in the fall or winter. Just because I think it's easier to get people in the door that way. We really did struggle with promoting the event and getting people to sign up for it. And also that has to do with the fact that it was the first time we ever tried to do a live event of any kind like this. I think if I had done something before this that was live, that was a group communal experience, I would have known better what to do and what not to do. But I think, you know, we didn't do anything wrong. It was just a really heavy lift to get people in the door. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I did mine also in August, and I had wanted to do it in September, but it wasn't possible to do it with Hugo House in terms of their schedule. And so I think the difficulty also, because it's still, people are still feeling reluctant because of COVID, getting people inside was difficult. I had the option with Hugo House to do it live and online, and I chose only to do it live. Personally, because I didn't quite understand how I would manage. I mean, I guess they would have done it, but I just didn't quite understand how I could do it online and live. And I also wanted to give people a reason to go out, as opposed to just do it on Zoom. I know we're on Zoom tonight, but I wanted people to feel like, well, if I want to see this, I have to go. But yeah, August is definitely a challenge. I would say the other thing that was a challenge for me, I ended up doing, this one event at Nova and then the event at Hugo House, and finding a community organization to do it with, because I think that Hugo House was perceived more as an arts related organization. So there was a real desire from the Office of Arts and Culture to do it with non-arts organizations. And I think the fact that Hugo House is not aligned with the discipline that I typically work in kind of helped that. But initially I had a hard time finding a group to work with. And initially I was going to work with the Central Area Senior Center. And then they shut down because of COVID, and they were not able to hold a live event. And then they had a change of personnel. And there were a lot of changes of personnel, and there were several other organizations that I reached out to. And as we all know, there were lots of changes of personnel during that time. So I would say that was a challenge for me, was finding, unlike David, who was creating his own event out of whole cloth, I was finding organizations to partner with. And that was difficult. It worked out ultimately, and I was very happy with how it went, but it was a challenge.
Is there anything you would have done differently in retrospect? And again, these questions are not pitched toward anyone.
I might have moved it into, the problem is I'm leaving for France in a week, and I'm gone until November. And so I didn't want to postpone my public event until November, having done the book. And when you just finish a project, you're really fresh with it and really I really wanted to do things that celebrated it too. And actually, I also held an event in my studio and printed images from the book larger and had the original watercolors. And it wasn't technically a part of the grant, but it was another way of sharing the work. So, I might have done this not during the summer, but it just, it wasn't a reasonable way for me to do it, actually.
Right.
I just want to, what you were saying, Ellen, reminded me that I have yet to mention the fact that part of my grant was creating a film that I showed at my event.
Yeah.
And I would just like to say that because of that being part of the grant and fulfilling it, and it really did serve as a great motivator for me to just finally cut the film. It ended up being 10 minutes instead of 5, which is what I originally pitched to CityArtist. But I showed that at the conclusion of my presentation at Passion Fruit, and I'm really proud of the film, and I'd happy to share a link to with everyone here in an email if you'd like. But I'm a very deadline driven person, and I love having deadlines to meet in order to achieve making a film, and I'd always wanted to cut together something like what I did for the event. And so I'm very thankful that CityArtist not only provided me money, but also the deadline for making that film.
Indeed, that's a universal motivator for sure.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So even though so much of this is clearly apparent between the lines of what both of you are saying, I do want to ask you, What can either of you say about how you grew as artists on this project? I mean, it might be in terms of your artistry, but also maybe in terms of your business knowledge or your financial acumen or time management or networking or technology, expansion. What it can be many things. What can either of you say about that?
Go ahead, Ellen.
Well, one of the things that I used the project to do was there was a lot of aspects of like, for example, I know this will sound ridiculous, but shooting food and doing setup photography and doing a lot of different setup things in my studio, and then also just certain aspects of Photoshop. And even though I've used a lot of Photoshop, it was like I decided I wanted to do certain things with certain images, and then I had to figure out how to do them. So I felt like I really learned a lot about just pushing my skills further, and which was gratifying for me. And then obviously it's there for me to use for other things. So technically, I was able to use the project as a way to benefit me and to learn more skills. The other thing I would mention is that this business of reaching out to people and asking them to be part of the generative process is not something that I had done before. I've done a lot of mail art projects where I've asked people to be deliverers of things. And, you do the 6 degrees of separation and you can find anybody who knows anybody. It's quite remarkable. But I never asked somebody to, it kind of invited them into the process artistically. And so that was an interesting and different approach. And I think the fact that I assured everybody that their responses were going to be anonymous made people feel a lot more comfortable, that they didn't have to feel like, oh, I'm going to be exposed here. So so that was different in terms of asking people to be part of the generative process.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Dave?
Well, as I mentioned, like the whole live component of this kind of mission of the grant was really pushing me out of my comfort zone. I mean, when I set foot on that stage during the live event and started to pitch my project to the room, like I'd realized that I'd never ever had to do that before. All of the ways that I've been pitching the project to people up until now have been one-on-one, through mutual friends, through email. People often reach out to me through the email portal of my website for the project. So to make a sort of group pitch was really intimidating. Like I mentioned, I mean, I've had performance experience before. I mean, I was a theater nerd in high school, so it's not like I never set foot on a stage. And I do have a sense of, because I'm an editor, I know how to like form an event with a beginning, middle, and end. So that part was really fun. And I would love to do it again. And I really think that this event provided me a real insight into what I would do next time differently and what I would do the same. So I just really, and I'm also really proud of the fact that, like, in preparation for the event, like I just took it on myself to go to different community events. And like I went to a queer people of color stand-up comedy event, and I reached out to one of the performers I saw there, and they came and performed for me. I did that in a few ways. In a way, I was kind of scouting for the event. And that part I was really excited about too. I thought that was pretty fun to kind of be like a producer of a live event. So yeah, so many ways that this project kind of pushed me outside of my comfort zone in really good ways.
Great, thank you. So, David, you talked a little bit about like who you invited to participate and how you kind of facilitated that through your friend and colleague who had sort of more of an inroad to this community. But what more can you and Ellen say about like who did you invite to participate? Did you, and how you reached out to, what networks you chose to reach out to? And well, we already know that you were reaching outside of your normal community. Did you have, were there further challenge? And you did talk about how it was a little challenging to get people to trust you at first. Do you feel like you expanded your network in any lasting way?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what more to say. I definitely made more connections, and I'm trying to foster those further now too. I haven't just cut off any connection. I'm really trying to really nurture those, because I do need more femme-identified interviewees, and that's my end goal.
Okay, great. Well, before I ask the same question of Ellen, just because we're kind of on the topic, did you what methods particularly did you use to invite people? I mean, you were attending in-person events, but did you use social media, or you had some personal connections? Did you, what other connections did you make, or what other means did you use to invite?
Well, I'm really glad that I partnered with Rachel Brister, because as I mentioned, she's a longtime resident of Seattle, and she really worked her connections and her contact lists hard. I also reached out to the Queer Film Festival, and they put the event in an email blast. Also with Northwest Film Forum. And it's interesting, promoting anything related to my project on social media has a lot of blockades, because I deal with explicit conversations about sex, and the major platforms really do not like that. So I didn't really rely on social media as much as maybe other people might, because I knew that because it does explicitly say sex, and sexual intimacy, I didn't really put a lot of effort into that. I really wanted mostly for it to be directed towards community groups and that sort of thing. And as I said, Rachel really helped out with that. So.
Great, thank you. Well, Ellen, what can you say about, who you invited to participate, and what kind of networks you reached out to that you haven't covered already, and what means and methods you used to do so?
I have a pretty big mailing list that I've just built over the years. And so I used MailChimp as a way of reaching out to people primarily. And there are about 300 people on my list. So, and it's grown over the years. So it's from all different aspects of my career. Each one of those little MailChimp things was designed, the writing of it was really designed to be entertaining and to engage people, and to try to draw people in. And I did reach out to my same mailing list multiple times of like 300 people, because it also built so that some people didn't respond to the first one, but they would respond to the second one. They didn't respond to the second one, but by then they'd gotten the third one, and they were now giving me answers to the first one. So it kind of became cumulative. And I also posted it on Instagram, and I got more, I got lots of likes on Instagram, but I got very few responses. So most of my responses came from my direct emails. And just as a sidebar, David, it seems to me that you did absolutely the right thing, because what you're doing was really requiring a kind of real sensitive approach to who you reach out to, whereas mine was just more random and, could be more random.
Great.
So.
All right. And so was the deciding factor of how many people you reached out to just determined by the fact of that you had an email list of a certain size?
Pretty much. I mean, I felt like reaching out to 300 people was, not nothing. And that the cumulative response, the cumulative contact of them, and the list grew a little bit over the time, because also what I would say in my email is, please share this with others. And if others would like to be involved in the project, please, forward my email. And so I did have some people who contacted me that I didn't know before, having gotten it from a friend. And so I tried to use that, again, sort of the 6 degrees of separation. Who do you know who might be interested, and would you pass this on? So
Great. Well,
and I have I'm not like one of these Instagram people who has lots of Instagram followers, but I think there are like 300 people, and there's probably some overlap because some people are my friends, but there are a number of people who I have no idea who they are who follow me on Instagram.
Great. Well, for either of you, are there any groups that you would like to engage for future projects?
You mean for future aspects of, see, one of the things for me is that I'm still working with, how do I get this book and out to larger groups of people? And so I've started engaging in conversations with some galleries in town. I met with Peter Miller just yesterday. Peter Miller books, people may know him for architecture and design. And while this book is not about architecture and design, Peter loves food. And so I thought that might be a hook. And I met with him yesterday because he does have a little exhibition space, but we both agreed ultimately that it was not really the right venue, but he's such a lovely, gracious person that he said, let me think about it and see what else I can come up with. So I'm continuing to try to create opportunities to share this work with others. Hence, that's why I've got the Pratt event in November with them. And yeah, I mean, I'm totally open to finding additional opportunities, which is also why I did an event in my studio to try to get more people. And what was kind of gratifying about the event in my studio is I had several copies of the book that were, basically kind of artist proof copies for people to look at. And it was amazing to me how many people just sat down and read it cover to cover. And so that was, because it's not like, I mean, yes, there were photographs and their drawings and their paintings and all of that, which you can walk through and you see and you're done. But with a book, it's a bigger commitment of your time. And so that was pretty gratifying. So yes, I'm still looking for more opportunities.
Okay. Before I turn that question over to David, I have a very specific question for you. What is where are all the printed books destined to go? Where are they?
Well, they are for sale, so I am selling them, and I have a artist book dealer in she's in Alabama of all places, and she places books primarily in university special collections and museums. And so she's already placed one at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art in their artist book collection, and one at Baylor University. And so she's also helping with getting the books placed, and there'll be one going to UW, Sue's Loeb collection. And I've been in contact with Jane Carlin, who is at the University of Puget Sound at Collins Library. So hopefully, what I love about getting my books into university collections is that those are all used as teaching collections. And so it's not like just going on a shelf somewhere or going to somebody's house or whatever. It's work that's used and as part of a teaching collection. And so that's really where I'm targeting to try to get books placed.
Yeah, art that lives on. Great, thank you. And David, how about you? Do you think that there was, what can you say about who you would invite if you were to continue this project, or with whatever future iteration of this project is going on? How do you see that network expanding?
Well, I'm definitely going to work more on the film that I made for the event. I think there's different sections to the film, and they can actually be split up into 3 different shorts, I think, but that definitely helped me start to think about the larger project, because I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm not really a podcaster in the sense that I want to do that for the rest of my life. The whole point of interviewing people was to eventually create a documentary feature or a docu-series, and having that piece of media now that I created for Passion Fruit, I think is really going to help me think about the larger project and how all the different parts fit together in a way that I've always kind of imagined. So that I think that will serve as sort of a genesis point of that the project will start to expand more in terms of the filming aspect. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm probably going to start to submit it to festivals and such. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we have covered a great deal of ground tonight, which is wonderful. And so just, I'd like to provide you each an opportunity before we kind of check in with what the audience might want to know. Is there anything that you haven't shared with us yet, either of you, in terms of future projects that you have planned or ideas that you're interested in exploring just for your next artistic venture?
Well, I mean, I really just the film and the docu-series, that's probably the next step for me past the podcast and the different, but I am going to continue the podcast just because it serves as a sort of kind of like a garden for future plantings.
Do you have a particular topic that you are that you're turning around in your head at the moment?
For the films, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, the same theme as I've always used for the Fruit Bowl project, coming of age and the different ways that we discover our sexual preferences and identities. That's a pretty big lift, and it's something that I think could actually be best served as a docu-series instead of just a simple one-off documentary feature. I actually just was accepted into a 3-day seminar for Film Independent. It's sponsored by Film Independent and CNN, and it's a workshop for docu-series. So I'm really excited about that. That's going to be in a couple of weeks, and I'm really excited that I have the film that I made for Passion Fruit as an example of my vision for the project moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you. And Ellen, how about you? Is there anything in addition you'd like to add about where you see your next projects going?
No, I find it a kind of difficult question because it's been so intense working on this for like almost 2 years. And so I think other than continuing to try to find other venues and opportunities to, I'd like to do something more exhibition wise, because there's a lot of material in the book that could be turned into larger photographs, and I've printed some of them larger. So I don't know exactly what the next thing is. I do, separate from this, I do a lot of pinhole and pinhole photography, and as I said, I'm going to France, and I've been working on these photographs for, I don't know, 3 years there. And so I actually have on my studio tables downstairs a couple hundred. I cut up all the contact sheets, and so been kind of grouping things, trying to figure out, making, how do I make a body work out of this? And it's not just a bunch of random stuff. And so I'm planning on working on that when I'm in France, and kind of trying to complete series of these photographs, and then determining whether or not they're destined for a book, or books, plural, or whether they're destined for more exhibition oriented work. So that's what I'm gonna be focusing on in the next immediate period.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge how much energy is expended in the culmination of a very labor-intensive and lengthy project, and after that, there has to be a period of rest.
Yeah, because your brain has to kind of, okay, process that through and make room for something else. And yeah. I mean, this was a very different kind of a book from what I've done before. So both in terms of conception and execution.
Right. Well, it's an exciting part in the cycle to be in the creative cycle for both of you to be in. Have I covered everything? Is there anything that either of you are just dying to share that we've missed this evening?
No, we've covered a lot.
You have been ideal share out candidates. This is great. And so I think this is the part where we might like to find out if there's anything that the audience would like to ask. I think that we're taking, are we taking comments or questions in the chat? If
Yeah, the chat's been pretty quiet so far. I think it's been a really rich discussion with a lot of detail. I've loved hearing about these different pieces so far. I hope to get to examine, Ellen, some of your books in multiple teaching collections if I wind up in some different universities.
Well, if you go to UW, they have a lot of my books. They have the most comprehensive collection of my work. So yeah, you just call Sandra Pupa and said, hey, I want to come and see Ellen Sollod's books, and she'll pull them out.
Thanks. And Dave, I'm really looking forward to exploring your podcast and seeing this film come together. The topics that you're exploring are really quite important to me, actually. So thank you for doing the work you're doing. Laurel and Diane, are there things that you're curious about wanting to hear from these artists?
Oh my gosh, I am so just thrilled and inspired and kind of feeling wired after hearing your descriptions of your projects. Such cool projects and very different projects, and yet, the intensity and the reach and the heavy lifting. Wow, just congratulations on these really, really cool projects. Just a couple of thoughts in my head. I had this vision of, like the book, how we have the little libraries, how wonderful it would be to have like the little libraries that were, I don't know if there's an age range for your books, but that would be such a cool way to get that out in public, if we had little libraries that were kind of, dedicated to, adult work or something like that. I'm really excited about the podcast. I want to listen to the podcast. So I wanted to ask you, how do I listen to the podcast?
Yeah, it's on all of the major platforms, but the easiest way to just go to fruitbowlpodcast.com.
What is it again?
I have it in my name on the screen, fruitbowlpodcast.com.
Okay.
That is, I think, the easiest way for people to find links to all the different platforms, and it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and it's really on any podcast aggregator, because it's on the major platforms. But you can also listen to the episodes on my website. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So, and everything's archived. So so you've got very cool.
You can even download the episodes directly from my website if you want to listen to them offline.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave, can I ask a podcast distribution logistics question?
Yeah.
I had a podcast many years ago, and in the old days, you would set up an RSS feed and you would put audio files on a website, and that would be job done.
Yeah.
You said your podcast is on Spotify. I'm guessing Spotify won't quite ingest an RSS feed the way that Apple iTunes used to, and the way that podcasts are originally meant to work. What's your distribution system look like for that podcast?
I actually think that Spotify will use the RSS feed. Like there's not a lot of, there's not a high obstacle to get onto Spotify. The real key is promoting it outside of Spotify and getting listeners to listen to it. That's a pretty hard sell because a lot of people are locked into their podcasts that they like.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere where people really only just listen to 3 or 4 every week in a consistent way. So to break through that and to get into somebody's rotation is difficult, but it's not impossible. I think consistency helps, and making each episode the same quality level. I actually now have 3 editors that I've trained who are in rotation, and they're helping me edit each of the interviews. Some of the interviews that I'm turning into episodes now were recorded pre-pandemic. That's how long I've been doing this, and how long it's taken me to actually get around to editing their stories. So I have a pretty deep archive of content that I am trying to really hard to get through before I start to record more. So yeah.
That's awesome. Diane, you're with us as well. Are there things that you are curious about from either of our presenting artists?
Well, as a relatively new Seattleite, I am just awed at the scope of what the Office of Arts and Culture is supporting. And I think it's wonderful. And I'm glad that's where my tax dollars are going. Thanks for sharing.
I love that comment.
Me too.
They quote me.
I'm very thankful as well.
Great. All right. Well, if that is all of the, if that's all that we need to know from our artists tonight, which I just want to say, thank you to you both. That was, I think that you have illustrated, both of you, completely why the Share Out is such a successful venture. It's that you're listening to your process, your creative process is fascinating, it's inspiring, and it's giving all the rest of us a lot of creative energy to think about, okay, how am I going to do this project that I want to do, and how did they do it? Not only from a creative standpoint, but from a practical standpoint. And so this has been, just a really fascinating, really lively time, and I really appreciate both of you sharing your insights with us.
I'd just like to say one thing. This is the first grant I've ever received in my entire life.
Hey.
And I really want to I wish Irene was here, because she's been such a patient person. And, like every time I've tried to, submit an invoice or whatever, I've always had to kind of redo it. And she's been so kind and generous with her time and helped me in the process of actually like describing what I needed to do in order to fulfill the requirements. And I just really appreciate all of the patience and time spent in helping me through that process. I really appreciate it.
And this is still being recorded, correct? So we can share that with Irene. She's brilliant. She has a level of humility, but just this gracious generosity, and she's so impactful in almost everything that she does. And I say almost everything because we hope she does vacation and she does sleep at some point in time. But, I mean, she's a monster power. She's just so engaged, and it's the authentic relationships that she builds that that's what you experienced, Dave. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and she came both to the Hugo House event, and then she came to the event in my studio. I was really quite moved by that, because I didn't expect it, and it was really lovely that she that she did that, and she actually brought a friend with her to the studio, so that was super nice. I do want to say something about the share out, and I hope that there is an opportunity to get more people to both do it, the artists, and also more opportunity somehow to get more people in the community to come, because we all kind of we all can feel like in the wilderness, laboring in the wilderness, doing our projects, and so you don't have that many opportunities to really, talk about what was the process, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's actually a really good idea, and much better than just writing a stupid report. And so I hope that, I don't know how to spread the word. I will certainly tell people that I thought it was great. But I think whatever arts can do to get, more people, because I think about, some of the stuff that Artist Trust does to try to help people learn how to do these things. And those of us who've been, I was totally shocked that I got the grant, but, those of us who've been lucky enough to get it, I think people are really willing and happy to share. And so it'd be nice if there were more people who took the Office of Arts and Culture up on the invitation and figuring out ways of getting more folks to come. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can speak to that because this is part of my little closing remarks here. Thank you so much for all attending. And this session is recorded and will be posted on our office's YouTube very, very soon. So you better believe that we'll be doing some promotion around it. And got a ton of great quotes here just in this recording alone to add to that. So thank you all for your authenticity, as Director Ali Barnes has put it. And to you, Ellen and Dave, for sharing your process and for being so willing to be so transparent and vulnerable in this space. And thank you, Alma, as our moderator and our back-end navigator, artist, and music phenomenon, Kevin Clark, for helping make this happen as well. Finally, Irene, we are going to, she's going to love hearing this recording, and we're going to praise her a ton when we see her very soon here. Send her good vibes wherever she is. Marshawn, thank you for helping staff this event too. M. Walker over there. Thank you. And Director Ali Barnes, thank you for being here as well and staying for the session. We hope to see you all in 2023 at the next one. Any last words, anybody?
No, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. I just wanted, I was a city artist a long time ago, and this was not possible when I was a city artist. And I just think this is so great. And I would love to see 100 people on this screen, it's so important and it's so enlightening and it's so inspiring.
Amen. More quotes. We're going to be using, it. Thank you so much, Laurel and Diane and all the other folks who came in and out of the space today, and all of our presenters. Thank you again.
Yeah.
On to the next one.
Have a great night, everybody.
All right.
Right. And so good to meet you all.
Thank you, Alma. Pleasure to meet you all.
Bye.
All right. So Marshawn, I think you can lock it up. End meeting.